Welcome to my YouTube channel Wise Whispers, where silence speaks.
The Quiet Revenge. My name is Nicholas, and I am 63 years old. I used to believe that by the time a man reaches 60, life becomes calmer. You imagine quiet mornings, warm family dinners, and the comfort of knowing you spent your life building something meaningful. But sometimes, the people you sacrifice everything for become the ones who hurt you the most. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is not anger. It is dignity. The morning of my birthday, the morning of my 63rd birthday, began like any other day. I woke up early, as I always do. Old habits never leave you. After 40 years of waking up at 5 in the morning to go to work, your body simply refuses to sleep late. I walked into the kitchen of the house I had built with my own hands 30 years ago. The same house where my son Daniel took his first steps. The same house where my wife Margaret used to bake birthday cakes every year. Margaret passed away 6 years ago after a long illness. Since then, the house had felt larger and emptier. But I still had my son. Or at least I thought I did. Daniel married a woman named Sophia 2 years ago. At first she seemed charming, polite, smiling. But slowly the warmth disappeared. And what remained was something much colder. Something sharper. Something that saw me not as a father, but as a burden. The invitation. 2 days before my birthday, Daniel came into the living room. "Dad," he said, "Sophia planned a birthday dinner for you." I looked up from my book, surprised. "For me?" He nodded. "Yes, a small party, family and a few friends." For a moment my chest warmed. Maybe things were improving. Maybe Sophia was trying. Maybe I had judged her too harshly. "That's very kind of her," I said. Daniel smiled awkwardly. "Yes, she said it would be special." I had no idea how right he was. The party. That evening the house was filled with people. Sophia had decorated the dining room with balloons and candles. Neighbors had arrived. Daniel's coworkers. Even a few of Sophia's friends, whom I had never met before. I felt slightly out of place in my own home. Still, I smiled politely. At my age, you learn to swallow discomfort. Sophia walked around the room like a queen, hosting a royal event. She wore a bright red dress and laughed loudly with her friends. Whenever someone looked at me, she would gesture toward me dramatically. "There's the birthday man," she would say. Everyone would clap. I smiled and nodded. But something about her tone felt strange. Like she was enjoying something I didn't understand yet. The toast. After dinner, Sophia stood up and tapped her glass. "Everyone," she said loudly. The room became quiet. She smiled and looked directly at me. "I'd like to say a few words about our beloved Nicholas." People turned toward me. I nodded politely. Sophia continued. "Nicholas has lived a very long life." A few people chuckled. "And he has done many things." Her voice dripped with fake sweetness. But as we all know, times change. The room grew slightly uncomfortable. She raised her glass. At 63, Nicholas is finally enjoying retirement. More laughter. But retirement can be expensive, right? People shifted in their seats. Then Sophia said the words that made my chest tighten. "Luckily, he lives with us now, so we can take care of him." A few people laughed. But Sophia wasn't finished. She looked at the guests and said loudly, "Though sometimes it feels like we're taking care of another child." The room burst into awkward laughter. I felt heat rise in my face. But the worst part came next. Sophia looked directly at me and said with a smile, "After all, freeloaders should be grateful when someone feeds them." The laughter stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. My son Daniel stared at the table. And in that moment, I realized something. Sophia didn't see this as my birthday. She saw it as a performance, a chance to humiliate me in front of everyone. The gift. Sophia clapped her hands. Oh, I almost forgot the birthday gift. She walked into the kitchen and returned with a small metal bowl. She placed it in front of me. Inside the bowl was dog food. The room went completely silent. Sophia smiled. Well, she said lightly, freeloaders have to eat too, right? Someone gasped. Daniel finally looked up. Sophia stopped. But it was too late. 30 pairs of eyes were staring at me. Waiting. Watching. Expecting anger. Expecting humiliation. Expecting a scene. But something strange happened inside me. Instead of anger, I felt calm. Very calm. I slowly stood up. I looked around the room. Then I smiled. My response. Thank you, Sophia, I said quietly. The guests looked confused. Sophia blinked. You're welcome, she said cautiously. I picked up the bowl and examined it. Then I looked at the room. You see, I said calmly, a man who has lived 63 years learned something important. Everyone listened carefully. People reveal their character when they believe they have power. Sophia's smile slowly faded. I continued. And tonight you revealed yours. The room was silent. Then I placed the bowl gently on the table. But don't worry, I said. You won't have to feed me anymore. Daniel looked confused. What do you mean, Dad? I reached into my pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. Inside that envelope, I said calmly, are the property documents for this house. Sophia's eyes widened. This house, I continued, belongs to me. I looked directly at Sophia. And I have just sold it. The room exploded with murmurs. Sophia stared at me in shock. You what? I nodded calmly. The new owners take possession next week. Daniel stood up. Dad, why would you sell the house? I looked at him sadly. Because I realized tonight that I don't live here anymore. The truth. Sophia's face turned pale. But this is our home. I shook my head gently. No, Sophia. This was my home. I looked around the room. I allowed you both to stay here after your wedding. I paused. But kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. Daniel whispered, Dad, where will you go? I smiled. Oh, I already have a place. Sophia suddenly looked nervous. What place? I took a deep breath. 3 years ago, I invested in a small apartment building. Gasps spread across the room. I also invested in a few companies. I looked at Sophia. And the income from those investments is more than enough for me to live comfortably. Sophia's mouth slowly opened. You're rich. I chuckled softly. I prefer the word prepared. Then I said the words that changed everything. And Daniel, I had planned to give you this house someday. Daniel's eyes filled with regret. But I continued. However, respect is more valuable than property. The shock. Sophia suddenly stood up. You can't do this. Her voice was shaking now. You can't throw us out. I raised an eyebrow. Throw you out. I shook my head. No. The new owners will. The guests were whispering loudly now. Sophia looked around desperately. You're humiliating us. I looked at the bowl of dog food. Then I looked back at her. No, Sophia. You already took care of the humiliation. The aftermath. One by one, the guests began leaving. No one wanted to stay in that uncomfortable room. Daniel approached me slowly. "Dad, I'm sorry." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know you are." He looked down. "I should have stopped her." "Yes," I said gently. "You should have." Sophia stood frozen near the table. For the first time since I met her, she had nothing to say. 1 week later, 7 days later, I moved into my new apartment overlooking a quiet lake. The building belonged to me. The neighbors were kind, and the mornings were peaceful. Daniel came to visit. Alone. He looked tired. "We had to move into a small rental," he said quietly. I nodded. He sat down across from me. "I ended up divorcing Sophia." I raised my eyebrows slightly. "She blamed everything on you," he continued. "But I realized something." "What's that?" I asked. He looked at me. "I allowed someone to disrespect my father." I nodded slowly. "And that's something a man should never allow." The final lesson. Months later, Daniel and I began rebuilding our relationship. Trust returned slowly. But it does return. Sometimes the hardest lessons come through pain. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It is simply walking away with your dignity intact. Moral of the story: respect is worth more than money, property, or pride. People who humiliate others often believe they hold the power. But true power belongs to those who remain calm, patient, and dignified. Because in the end, character always reveals itself. And those who treat others with cruelty eventually face the consequences of their own actions.